Tick is on his way out. Yesterday, Boston sent Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to Atlanta in a three-team trade with the Hawks and the Nets. This marks the second big offseason move by the Celtics, as we saw Drew Holiday traded to the Blazers Monday. Shams says Boston may just be getting started. Take a listen.
My understanding is the Celtics are getting offers, calls on both Jaylen Brown and Derek White. The Celtics have high price thresholds for both players. We know how great Jaylen Brown and Derek White are, so I'm sure they're getting some massive offers, some pretty big time calls as well. Their preference has been to keep both players, but will a team match that price threshold that the Celtics, I'm told, have set around the league for Jaylen Brown and Derek White to be able to get them? They are listening, but will a team get there?
All right, Bob, you are the architect of the Warriors, the last real dynasty that we've had in the NBA. How would you handle the situation? Would you trade White or would you trade Brown?
No, I wouldn't. Now, look, Brian and I were talking off the air. You can answer the phone. Say, okay, I don't want to trade these guys, but if you have something to say, I'll listen. People made offers on Curry. You know, you can't get mad at them. You know, it's their job. Their job is to call, the other team's call, and you just lay it down and say, look, you're gonna have to blow me out of the water. Because sometimes people do. Sometimes people make crazy offers, and you go, well, we got to look at that. But with the trades of Porzingis, Molly, and the trades of Holiday, they put a huge dent. What, $100 million? What's the number they've carved out of the tax?
They've saved over $200 million in luxury tax.
Already. So they've taken some of that pressure off. Now, if we were sitting here right now, and Porzingis is still on the team, and Holiday, I'd answer the question differently. But they've alleviated some of that financial pressure in the last, 48, 72 hours to the degree where now they can really be patient with Brown and White because they did those other things.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not even interested in answering this question right now. You distracted me. I want to know when
and who
did you get? And you have to tell. I know you can't say who. I know you can't say who. But I want to know when somebody had the temerity to call you and say, we're calling about acquiring Steph Curry. Now, was this early?
Yeah, much earlier.
It wasn't after. It wasn't after he was in flow and wasn't suffering from the ankle injuries and was winning championships.
The only guy, I'll tell you, he doesn't care. The only guy that would mess around with it was Ainge. But he'd start laughing when he did it. He's like, what are you going to do with Curry? This was after Curry was Curry.
Yeah.
But you laugh, but because he always loved Ainge and he loved Curry the whole way through. But no, I mean, look, obviously I love Jaylen Brown and Derek White. They're not Steph Curry. Jason Tatum, I think, is the guy that people think is the Celtics kind of the center, the pillar. So you might say Jaylen Brown, Derek White's their second, third best player. It's okay to ask, right? I mean, we saw Luka Doncic.
Yes.
Come on.
A year ago, you would
seriously.
No one have ever said
Seriously.
But what about this? What about this deal, though? The fact that Jason Tatum is hurt and you had already paid Jaylen Brown $300 million, my attitude is find out if he can be a number one for you.
And I think that's
what's wrong with that?
No. I think that's what they're. Well, we're all gonna find out.
I think we're asking the wrong question. I think the real question, and I know it's so different for fans, and I know it's annoying. I'm sorry. The question is, in the modern NBA, can you have two players making this much money and
Probably
truly
not.
build a roster? That's really the question.
Probably not.
It's nothing to do with, is Jaylen Brown a number one? Can these two guys get along and all that stuff? Can we get this guy in the draft? The question is, with how penal it is, can you have a roster that's that top heavy? And you add Derek White to it, and now you're talking.
Well, we talked about, in the NFL, they talk about having a quarterback on a rookie scale, right? That's the time you can go pay an edge rusher, you can go pay a receiver, you can go pay somebody. But now in the NBA, what Oklahoma City did was they won a championship with guys on rookie contracts. Boston doesn't have that. And you see them win a championship, but Oklahoma City will have the same issue in 2-3 years when Jalen Williams and Chet are making their money. So the real question is, can you have a mature team and a bench? We just talked about Jokic losing some guys. Bruce Brown, that's Alex Caruso in this case. Can you keep a team? We saw the Celtics. I thought they were going to win it this last year. They had the injury. I don't know. I can almost say the injury wasn't the reason they lost, though.
No.
And they were losing.
They were losing.
And so you go, wow, how'd that happen? And they had an unbelievable bench, but we see that cannot last. So your question of can you have two guys making that much money, then you have to really strip down the rest of it.
Do you know that yesterday the Thunder were making calls to move up in the draft?
Yeah, of course.
Because on the parade day, they have 2 picks. They have the 15th pick and like 20-something. Because they know that someday in the foreseeable future, they're going to have a top-heavy team. And maybe the guy that they get at 15 tonight, or maybe they can trade those 2 picks and get somebody at 11 or an 8.
Forward thinking.
Maybe they can get that guy, and he will replace Lou Dort in 2 years or whatever when they have to make a trade like the Celtics just made today. Because the Thunder realize that this is a new reality.
And the reason that's interesting, what we had, how many last different champions? 7 how many years?
7 in a row.
7 in a row. So nobody's repeated, right?
Right.
Not only that, nobody's won the year after that, right? So it's like brand new. That's probably where we're headed, because the ability to sustain a team used to be, and you said this, I'd go to Joe Lacob and I'd say, hey, you want to bring Iguodala back? And the price was money. It wasn't, if we bring Iguodala back, we're going to lose a pick. We can't trade back and take on more salary. We're limited. All these things the second apron does. And interestingly for owners now, when the fan base would see, they'd say, why don't we go into the tax? Why don't we go into the tax? And the fans don't care, right? You're a fan of a team, spend the money. You got plenty of money. But now owners are able to say, I can't do that anymore because of the second apron. Yeah. So everything's changed.
I tell the story of Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer has $140 billion. $140 billion. There are times when Steve Ballmer, they start an afternoon game, and at the beginning of the game, at the end of the game, his net worth moves by $1 billion, okay? That's what kind of money he has. Now, last year, he saw the second apron rules, and their first order of business was to tell Paul George, we really appreciate it, we'll see you.
And it wasn't for money. It was for this
flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they were like, it wasn't because he couldn't afford it.
And that's why we're talking about parity, right? So the hard thing for a GM now is, you talked about Oklahoma City trying to trade up the day of the parade. That's what the thinking has to be. So it can't just be, you're not the Yankees, you can't be the Dodgers, you can't just spend, because the rules are limiting.
At cutting their roster. Jaylen Brown has been an untouchable player in recent years. If you wanted him, you could call the Celtics. You would not get a return call. That is no longer the case. They are listening. With the draft tonight and several teams with high picks potentially willing to make offers, this is the time to make one for Jaylen Brown. Do I think they're actually going to trade him or Derek White? I am highly skeptical of that. Are you getting hung up on? You are not. So let's watch and find out how motivated the Celtics are.
Markeith, I mean, this would be just breaking it all down to the studs, right? If you're going to tear it down, you're going to say we're going to be without Tatum next year, so we don't think we can win the title. September of 2026 feels like a million years off. Let's tear it down to the studs and we'll start over again next year building around the one superstar. What would you say if they do that?
I would say it just doesn't line up with Jason Tatum where he's at in his career, right? He's going to have 1 year off. So, I mean, breaking the whole team down and pulling a brand new team around him and then expecting what expectations he might want to not be there with a young team. So I wouldn't say that. I would just say, continue to get under the salary cap as much as you can and be under the second apron and then bring some guys in.